Welcome to PG Pathshala course on biophysics, and this is paper 3 on cellular and molecular biophysics, and I am discussing today module 1, levels of biological organization. I am Dr. Ruby Dhar and DBT Biocare fellow, and I work at AIIMS, New Delhi. So, just to begin with this module, the earth is assumed to be about 4 billion years old. For that much time, various species of organisms have already emerged and disappeared. However, it is quite ironic how, in order to maintain equilibrium, living organisms are classified in a hierarchical and orderly manner according to their level of complexity. In each successive level, the complexity of life increases and a distinguishable property can be observed. This module consists of the following objectives. That first, we need to understand why we need the various levels of organization, and then what are the various levels of biological organization, and then to elaborate we will be talking about the various levels like atoms, molecules, cells, the cells can be divided further into animal and plant cells, difference between the animal and plant cells, also about unicellular and multicellular organisms, prokaryotes and eukaryotes, and then coming up to the next level, which is called the organelle, and then tissue, organs, and various like human organs and plant organs, what is the function of, like how different organs have different function and their importance, talking about organisms and what is actually a living organism, and then we will discuss about the population, community, ecosystem and biosphere. Now, to begin with the introduction about the level of organization, it is very important for us to understand that why we need different various levels of organization. Our environment is a bag full of components. So, you can imagine the world consists of so many different things which are different from each other, yet are mutually dependent on each other. The components are both living and non-living, and they play vital roles in their own domain. With any one of the components being absent, the biological organization will suffer in more than one way. In all the levels of this organization, the individual components are responsible for everything which make life possible. It would be unfair to establish a distinction between each of these components regarding their level of importance. As said, each component holds its own importance in its own place, and it is equally dependent on the other components, which again are important to the entire biological organization. Mainly, the requirement for biological organization are organization at different levels. So, it is like cataloging, then division of labor, cataloging of various units of life. Now, what are the various levels of biological organization? Biological life forms are composed of cells, which are the smallest unit of life, and then chemically can be broken down to molecules, which are different arrangements and combinations of atoms, which are the smallest particles which retain an element's identity. In a multicellular organism, these cells compose tissues, which compose organs, which compose organ system, and which ultimately form the entire organism. Different organisms all have the same basic biological structure, which starts with the cell. Single-celled organisms, while only being composed of a single cell, are still very complex in their intracellular workings and the environment. Multicellular organisms, such as us humans, however, are much more complex and are composed of many different types of cells which all work together. Molecules are group of atoms. Cells are the smallest unit of living things. So, these are like, we are starting with the lowest level of organism and going to the hierarchical level. Tissues, groups of cells working together, and next comes the organs, which are group of tissues working together, and then forms the organ system, which are group of organs working together, and combining all the organs forms the organism. And group of organisms in the same area is called the population. The next level of organization is the community, populations that live together in a defined area. The next one is the ecosystem, community and its surrounding. And combining everything forms the most hierarchical level is the biosphere. Now, elaborating all these different levels, we'll start with the atom. Now, an atom is smallest particle in an element that has the properties of the element. It is not possible to break down the atom further, retaining the properties of the element. Atoms are not visible to the naked eye and are the basic building blocks. For example, the atoms of element gold cannot be broken down further, and each atom has the properties of gold. Next, moving to molecules. Molecules are formed by the combination of two or more atoms. Unlike atoms, molecules can be subdivided to individual atoms. The atoms are bonded together in a molecule. Molecules also are not visible to the naked eye, while can be seen through highly magnifying microscopes and other scientific devices. Water is composed of numerous water molecules. Each water molecule is made up of one oxygen atom and two hydrogen atoms. So, a water molecule can be further divided into oxygen and hydrogen atoms. But these atoms cannot be subdivided. In a molecule, atoms are bonded together by single, double or triple bonds. The next level is the cells. Cells are a basic unit of life, sharing many common mechanisms across different classes of organisms like plants, animals, microorganisms. Between these classes, there are also key differences in cell architecture. Like in a cell, the external bilayer, which is the plasma membrane, and the nuclear membrane are built and maintained by lipids. Stiff protein filaments like microtubules and actin filaments confer rigidity to the cell's cytoskeleton. The rate of production of proteins, which is like the gene regulation, is controlled by many factors including the physical forces acting on the cell and the cell's mechanical environment, and of course the external factors. In animal cells, a network which is like a polymer gel of actin filaments is the key element in cell motility, as it is stiff enough to exert forces that deform the cell membrane. All living organisms are made up of cells, which are the unit of life. A cell comprises a plasma membrane consisting of a phospholipid bilayer, genetic material, and various organelles that control the cellular function and respond to various stimuli, and they have specified function. A cell produces and in turn utilizes various macromolecules for sustaining life. Example, lipid, amino acids, nucleic acids. Now, what is the difference between plant and animal cells? Both animal and plants have different type of cells depending on their functions. Animal cells have various kind of cells. There are various kind of cells in animals and they differ in size. And like liver cells, which are several dozen micrometers in diameter. Nerve cells, which are several meters long. The smallest size visible through the naked eye is generally about 0.1 millimeter, and through a light microscope it's about 200 nanometer. Anything less than 1 millimeter cannot be seen clearly without an electron microscope. And as we know that animals have different cell types which function and help in different functions depending on whether it's a liver cell or heart cell or nerve cell. Now moving on to plant cells. Now plants also, similar to animals, they also have different cell types. So some cells help in photosynthesis, some cells help in the transportation of the nutrients, some cells help in giving strength to the plants. So again, plants have different kind of cell types. So the following table further elaborates the difference between plant and animal cells. Animal cells are generally small in size than plant cells, and animal cells don't have a cell wall, which plant cells do have a cell wall. Except the protozoan Euglena, no animal cell possesses plastids. Most plant cells have large vacuole, while animal cells have small, and there are many small vacuoles. Animal cells have chromosomes and centrioles, while plants lack them. Now next, coming up, we are talking about the different cell types of plant and animal. Then we are discussing about the unicellular versus multicellular organism. The number of cells in the body varies with different organisms. So what are unicellular organisms? In some organisms, the body is formed of a single cell, and these organisms are called unicellular. In these organisms, all life activities are carried out inside one cell with its internal structures. The intracellular structures are called the organelles, example amoeba and euglena. Now what are multicellular organisms? In vast majority of plants and animals, the body is made up of numerous cells and they are called multicellular organisms. A group of cells functions in the same way to form a tissue or an organ. Most cells are specialized to perform one or few functions, hence they depend on each other for survival. Now for example, in plants, xylem cells in plants are required for water transport in plant. Now nerve cells in animals are required for brain function and responding to a stimuli. So different cells are having different functions. Now living organisms can also be divided as prokaryotes and eukaryotes. What are prokaryotes? These are organisms without a cell or any other membrane bound organelles. Most are unicellular, but some prokaryotes are multicellular. Unicellular prokaryotes examples are bacteria, archaea, protozoa, and multicellular prokaryotes are myxobacteria, magnetoactic bacteria. And what are eukaryotes? These are organisms whose cells are organized into complex structures by internal membranes and a cytoskeleton. The most characteristic membrane bound structure is the nucleus. This feature gives them their name, also spelled eukaryote, which comes from the Greek meaning good and true and meaning nut, referring to the nucleus. Animals, plants, fungi and protists are eukaryotes. Protista are unicellular eukaryotes. The term unicellular denotes that these organisms have only one cell, while the term eukaryote means that each of these cells has a nucleus and other organelles held in place by membranes. While these protists can be both plant-like or animal-like, their taxonomy is still undecided. Major difference between the prokaryotes and eukaryotes are highlighted in the following schematic diagram. So, as you can see in the figure, prokaryote means pro means before and karyon means nucleus, and eu means after, karyon means nucleus. So, the eukaryotes have a nucleus and prokaryotes do not have a nucleus. Prokaryote cells are smaller and organelles are absent in prokaryotes. Prokaryotes have circular chromosome. Usually, on the other hand, eukaryotes have more than one chromosome and they are not circular. Prokaryotes mostly depend on asexual reproduction, rather eukaryotes are dependent on sexual reproduction. Prokaryotes are not dependent on oxygen and that is why they are called anaerobic, while eukaryotes are dependent on oxygen and hence are called aerobic. And so next we would be, we discuss about the various cell types and how they are being divided into prokaryotes, eukaryotes, unicellular, multicellular, and broadly categorizing them into the plants and animal cells. And next, after cells, we are going to talk about the tissue. Like a group of cells give rise to the formation of tissue. An aggregate of similar cells and cell products forming a definite kind of structural material with a specific function in a multicellular organism is called tissue. These groupings of cells form tissues which then make up organs and various parts of the body. There are four main types of tissue in human body which can be further subdivided into various subtypes depending on their respective function. Examples of four main types of tissue are the muscle tissue, epithelial tissue and nervous tissue and the connective tissue. So, depending on their function, muscle tissue is made up of excitable cells that are long and fibrous. These cells are ready for contraction or the activation of tension in our muscles, making it possible for us to move our body parts. They can be further divided into three major subtypes like smooth muscle, cardiac muscle and the skeletal muscle. The next tissue form is the epithelial tissue and is made up of epithelial cells which are vastly different from the muscle cells. These cells can be flat, cuboidal or the columnar. They are joined tightly together making a single or stacked continuous sheet, protective cover of the body in the form of skin. Epithelial tissue can also be found lining some internal cavities and organs. And the next tissue type is the connective tissues, which makes up a connective web inside our body, holding our body parts together and providing support are the main job of this tissue. Connective tissue fills in the spaces inside our body with a matrix made up of fibers within a liquid, solid or jelly-like substance. Nervous tissue is found within the nervous system and is made up of unique specialized cells. Like electrical circuits, the nervous system transmits signals from nerves to the spinal cord and brain. Cells known as neurons conduct these impulses, making it possible for us to use our senses. So, this we discussed about the various types of tissues, and now the tissue types join together to form an organ, which is the next level of organization. So, starting with the organ, as we know, depending on the function, plants and animals are again they have different types of organs. So animals, if you see in the figure, there are different types of organs in the animal body and which are required for different functions, like the liver, the heart. So they perform different functions. Like multicellular plants and animals have organs to perform specific functions. Schematic diagram shows various organs in plants and human body, and now combining the organs forms the organism. In biology and ecology, an organism, in Greek we call organon, means instrument, is an organized individual living system such as animal, plant, fungus or microorganism. There are two main classes of objects: non-living objects that are essentially inert and obey physical forces in a purely mechanical way, example water in ocean, sand in desert, and then the others is the living things. Individuals in the living group have the quality known as life. This class of matter includes individuals with the capability to reproduce and producing new organisms that are more or less like themselves, so that they can utilize energy and metabolize further. The concept of organism is one of the fundamental concepts in biology and is used as the basis for discussions of evolution, ecology, genetics and so forth. Now, what are living organisms? In biology, an organism is an assembly of molecules with any contiguous living system properties and are known to have the following characteristics. They are made from structures called cells. They reproduce by genetic material called DNA. They respond to stimuli from the environment and they synthesize an energy substance called ATP or the adenosine triphosphate from the environment, and they live and grow using that energy. Coming up, discussing a little bit on growth and development. So each organism has a distinct life cycle, and then is the reproduction. Sexual reproduction, two cells unite from different parents, and asexual reproduction is the new organism which is formed from the same parent. And then responding to the environment. The environment is constantly changing, so organisms must change or adapt or they will face extinction. So how they can maintain a balance in the changing environment, and then maintaining the homeostasis. Homeostasis is the process by which organisms keep their internal conditions relatively stable. If homeostasis is disrupted in major way, the organisms will not survive or they will succumb to any dreadful disease. Another level of organization is population. All the members of the single species who live in one space is called a population. Example, like a herd of buffalo. Next level is the community, a collection of populations of multiple species. Biological communities have many different species to species interaction. All the interactions affect the diversity of the community. Examples of various interactions that may be found within a community include parasitism, predation, competition, mutualism and commensalism. Many of the interactions within a community benefit numerous species, while others benefit only one species and promote high level of competition within the community. Communities have boundaries in space and time. Examples like a forest, populations of trees, populations of mushroom, populations of birds, they are all living in this community. And a lake. So, lake consists of population of insects, population of fish, populations of algae. Coming up to the next level is the ecosystem. Various living organisms which live together with their non-living environment is called the ecosystem, like a home. An ecosystem is any community of living and non-living things that work together. The living things are biotic, features, and the non-living things are the abiotic features. While ecosystems do have boundaries, they are not always clear, and it may be difficult to see where one ecosystem ends and another begins. Each ecosystem is unique, but all ecosystems have three basic components. Now, these are the autotrophs, which are the producers of energy, then the heterotrophs, which are the consumers of energy, and then the non-living matter. Plants make up the majority of the autotrophs in an ecosystem, while most of the heterotrophs are the animals. Non-living matter is the soil, sediments, leaf litter and other organic matter on the ground or at the bottom of an aquatic system. And then we are going to talk about the final level of organization. The hierarchical is the biosphere, surface of the earth, air, water, land, where living things exist. It is the worldwide sum of all ecosystem. The term biosphere was coined by geologist Eduard Suess in 1875. Ecology is the scientific study of interactions among organisms and between organisms and their environment. So, we have almost reached the end of this module. Just to summarize this module, our environment is a bag full of components which are different from each other, yet are mutually dependent on each other. The components are both living and non-living, and they play a vital role in their own domain. Second point, mainly the requirement for biological organizations are to provide organization at different levels, division of labor, cataloging of various units of life. Biological life forms are composed of cells, which are the smallest unit of life, and then chemically can be broken down to molecules, which are different arrangements and combinations of atoms, the smallest particles which retain an element's identity. Cells are the basic unit of life, sharing many common mechanisms across different classes of organisms like plants, animals, microorganisms. Between these classes, there are also key differences in cell architecture. In cell biology, an organelle is one of several structures with specialized functions suspended in the cytoplasm of a eukaryotic cell. At next level, an aggregate of similar cells and cell products forming a definite kind of structural material with a specific function in a multicellular organism is called the tissue. An organ is a structure that contains at least two different types of tissue functioning together for a common purpose. And then there are many different organs in the body, the liver, kidney, hearts, skin. These are different organs. The next level of organization is the organism. In biology and ecology, an organism is an organized individual living system such as animal, plant, fungus or microorganisms. All the members of the single species who live in one space forms a population.